Welcome in to Outkick the show. I'm your fearless leader, Clay Travis. I hope wherever you may find yourself across the country, across the world, you are having a spectacular Wednesday. All right, but let's start with the NFL. We're down 75% of the NFL season is complete. If you have been paying attention to the NFL all year, you know that much has been going on like crazy. All season long. It's been very hard to predict what's going to happen outside of the top 2 or 3 teams. There's been a lot of insanity all season long in the NFL. So, I'm going to start with you, the list of sadness. The 5 worst teams in the NFL so far this year. I'm going to give them to you in order. In the 28th spot, the Detroit Lions. In the 29th spot, the Arizona Cardinals. The New York Jets, the Oakland Raiders, and the 49ers. Those are the 5 worst teams in the NFL. Not to be outdone, by the way. Not to be outdone, all of these teams, those 5 included, have all lost the ability to contend for the NFL playoffs. Right now, if you go into the NFL playoffs, we can pour out the drink. I don't want to pour out the drink right now because I don't want to make a mess because I'm indoors. But these are the teams in both the AFC and the NFC that are competing for high draft picks already, that have already been eliminated from making the playoffs with a full season left. Are you ready? In the AFC, the Cleveland Browns, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Buffalo Bills, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the New York Jets, and the Oakland Raiders, all of your season's done. That's 6 teams in the AFC out of 16. Their season already over. Again, those teams, Cincinnati Bengals, Cleveland Browns, Buffalo Bills, Jacksonville Jaguars, New York Jets, and Oakland Raiders. It's going to take 10 wins to get to the playoffs in the AFC. All of those teams have already lost 7 or more games. All right, what about the NFC? NFC, not as bad because there's a lot of potential to get a playoff spot even with an 8-8, 7-9, 9-7 type record. But these teams have eliminated themselves. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I really do believe, have eliminated themselves. Officially, they will this weekend when the New Orleans Saints win. Tampa Bay, Green Bay, Atlanta, the Giants, the Detroit Lions, the Arizona Cardinals, and the San Francisco 49ers. All of those teams are eliminated. So there are 32 NFL teams. 11 of them have already eliminated themselves before they even get to a game in December, hardly. All right? So here are the top 5 in the NFL, according to my breakdown. The best team in the NFL right now is still the New Orleans Saints. What I love about the Saints is even though they went on the road and they lost to the Dallas Cowboys 13-10, they played their D-level game. And Drew Brees in particular played his F-level game, and they only lost 13-10. They had a complete chance to win that game, even though they were utterly awful in that game. They only lost by 3 points. They only gave up 13. I think the Saints in the entirety of the NFL have the best combination of explosive offense and outstanding defense, which is why I have them as the number 1 overall team in the NFL right now. In the second spot, I've got the Rams. They're sitting at 11-1. I know they have a better record than the Saints, but they lost to the Saints head-to-head. I like Drew Brees and that offense and defense combo better than I do the Rams' defense, which has been flat-out awful so far. Maybe getting back Aqib Talib is going to make a difference. The Rams on the road against the Bears this weekend. We'll see how that goes. I have the Chiefs in the 3rd spot. This is an interesting weekend game, I think. The Chiefs are going up against the Baltimore Ravens. You got the number 1 offense in the NFL going head-to-head with the number 1 defense in the NFL. By the way, how long have the Ravens had great defenses? 20 years? I mean, it seems like the Ravens have always had the best defense in the NFL and a very mediocre offense. I believe that the Chiefs will get the win, but I've got the Chiefs in the 3rd spot right now. In 4th, and by the way, stat that I can't get enough of, the Chiefs, who are right now the number 1 seed in the AFC, that means they'd advance to the divisional round, get a bye, only need to win 1 game to be playing for a trip to the Super Bowl. The Chiefs have not won a home playoff game since 1993. Joe Montana was the quarterback 25 years ago. Everybody always wants to talk about what an incredible environment Arrowhead is. It's been 25 years since the Chiefs won a home playoff game. That's pretty unbelievable. That is an unbelievable stat. In the 4 spot, I've got the San Diego Chargers. Now they're the LA Chargers, but to me, they're always going to be the San Diego Chargers. I keep saying the San Diego Chargers. Maybe it's because they're in LA and they have no fans. I think the Chargers, when they went on the road and won against the Steelers, that was an impressive win to me. Their second half performance was as good as anybody had been all season in the NFL. I love what Phillip Rivers is doing. He's got a 115 passer rating. I think that's the 3rd highest in the NFL right now, maybe even the 2nd. I haven't checked the stats updated this week. And I think the Chargers are just legit, even with Melvin Gordon injured. And then in the 5 spot, I've got the New England Patriots sitting there at 9-3. They've got an intriguing game this weekend. They go on the road against the Miami Dolphins. The Patriots are just 7-10 in the 17 years that Tom Brady has been the starter. 1-4 against the number and straight up in the last 5 on the road in Miami. Miami has played the Patriots insanely well for whatever reason. Maybe it's the heat. Maybe it's just, I can't figure out why the Patriots can't go on the road and play well against the Miami Dolphins. But if you remember last year, the Patriots went on the road and the Dolphins whipped them. Jay Cutler just took it to them. That was an utter beatdown. Good point. Phillip Rivers has 9 kids with the same woman. Got to be close to an NFL record. All right. That is my NFL top 5. That is my NFL bottom 5. Big news. If you're an SEC football fan or a college football fan, Kelly Bryant has decided to transfer for his final season of eligibility to Missouri. This is a big deal. I think it's a big win for Mizzou. I think that everybody out there knew that Kelly Bryant was looking at a bunch of different schools, UNC, Arkansas, Auburn, I think. He looked all over the place. Mizzou is also getting a grad transfer wide receiver from Arkansas. I think this is going to be a pretty big deal for Mizzou. And underrated, and this is very underrated, Derek Dooley had an incredible year as the offensive coordinator for Missouri. Missouri, a lot of people didn't pay attention to this team. I gambled on them a lot. I pay attention to a lot of college football teams. Mizzou could have very easily, maybe even should have been 10-2. They lost on the last play of the game to South Carolina, and they lost on the last play of the game to Kentucky. Both of those games, if the rain doesn't come down like it did, then we have no issue with the South Carolina game from a gambling perspective. Mizzou would have won that one. And if the officials officiate the game correctly against Kentucky, then Mizzou would have won that game as well. So Derek Dooley and Barry Odom at Missouri have things rolling in a really good way. You have to be very excited if you got Kelly Bryant. Given the fact that Jake Fromm is coming back, I still think you have to make Georgia the favorite in the SEC East. But I think Missouri is going to be up there as a top 20 team next year. Okay, a lot of questions about Hugh Freeze. Here is what I have heard about Hugh Freeze. I have heard that Hugh Freeze is being blocked by people at the University of Tennessee, and that they are not allowing him to be hired. Now, before you all lose your minds, what I don't know about this as well is what the SEC response to Hugh Freeze would be. I don't know what the SEC response would be, so I don't know if that blocking is coming in consultation with the SEC league office. So I'm not sure what the latest is going to end up being, what the end result will be, but I am hearing that Hugh Freeze would love to go to Tennessee and be the offensive coordinator there, but that there is a administrative block that is working against him right now. Who is to blame? I don't know, but I do believe that that's the hang-up on Hugh Freeze, and I think it could lead him elsewhere, potentially down to Florida State to be the offensive coordinator of the Seminoles. I think that's a bad deal for Tennessee. I don't know specifically who's responsible for not letting Hugh Freeze be hired. I don't know if it is somebody at Tennessee who is making a concerted decision to block it on their own, or whether it's related to the SEC and the fact that the SEC is not ecstatic about Hugh Freeze coming back into conference without having worked somewhere else first. That's the latest update that I have for you on the Hugh Freeze offensive coordinator search. All right, some positive news. I thought I thought that the George H.W. Bush production of that funeral in the Washington's National Cathedral was as phenomenal of a celebration of life as a funeral could be. It was extraordinary in all respects. I thought if you didn't watch it, go out on YouTube, grab some of those videos, watch some of those tributes. I dare you, if you have a soul, to not find yourself crying. I thought that John Meacham was great. I thought the former Prime Minister of Canada was outstanding. Alan Simpson, the former senator from Wyoming. And then in what has to be an incredibly difficult thing to do, to eulogize your own father in such a public forum like George W. Bush did. Again, a eulogy in general is insanely difficult to give, but a public eulogy where you know the audience is going to be in the tens of millions of people watching you all around the world. I thought George W. Bush did a phenomenal job on that eulogy. I thought that there were a couple of lines that were fantastic. One of them was legitimately funny, talking about how the senior Bush had such a good sense of humor, and George W. Bush said, and you know that because he let Simpson speak at the funeral. Unbelievable delivery of that joke. That's one of the funniest jokes I've ever heard in a funeral setting ever. I mean, just a phenomenal delivery, outstanding. The anecdotes that were told, again, I've been told you guys that I've been reading a lot about World War II, and to me, that is truly, they were the greatest generation. And when you think about George W. Bush at George Bush Sr., this is why you shouldn't name your kids after you. When you think about George Bush Sr. at 20 years old, flying that airplane in September of 1944, doing a bombing run, having his airplane struck, having his 2 crew members bail out, and then bailing out on his own and being rescued by a submarine floating in the Pacific in a life raft. It is utterly unbelievable. Just unbelievable to think about what those guys did, how brave they were. I don't know if you saw the video of Bob Dole at 95 years old standing and saluting the casket of George Bush Sr. It was an ennobling experience. And I have asked this question in general. Would our generation, or any generation for that matter, be capable of combating actual evil? This generation that we have now is very good at combating evil thoughts, things that make them sad on social media. How many people, and again, we're talking about the masses. There are undoubtedly great citizens who are soldiers today, right? There are great leaders in all of our military. But when you have to mobilize pretty much the entire country to fight a war, would we be capable of marshaling that kind of unity to fight a war today? I genuinely question whether it would be possible and whether the people who would need to fight, the young men primarily, right, that are going to be fighting that war, whether they would have the balls to do the things that our grandfathers and great-grandfathers did. How many people do you feel comfortable today would actually be brave enough to march into a cold, awful, stormy beachhead like they did at Normandy into a hail of Nazi bullets? I've said this before, but that generation fought actual Nazis. The modern day younger generation, it's actually younger than millennials, spends all day calling people Nazis on Twitter who have different opinions than they do. It's an amazing transition in the world from fighting actual Nazis and risking your life at the age of 18 or 19 years old to fighting made-up people on the internet who have different opinions than you and are therefore modern-day Nazis. There's really no similarity. And I read the great book about E Company in the 101st Airborne and their service overseas. And what stood out to me is an anecdote that I'll be talking about for the rest of my life. Those guys in the 101st Airborne, the paratroopers, most of them, I want you to think about, you want to talk about big brass balls. I want you to think about this for a minute. Most of those guys, the first time that they stepped onto an airplane in their lives, they parachuted out of it. I want you to think about how unbelievable that is for a moment. The very first time they got onto an airplane in their life, all these small town boys who got drafted to go fight against Adolf Hitler and the Germans, the very first time they got onto an airplane, they stepped off the airplane with a parachute on their back. You want to talk about big brass balls. Can you imagine the bravery that it takes? The very first time, Band of Brothers is the book, Easy Company. The very first time that they got on an airplane, they jumped off the airplane with a parachute on their back. It's an unbelievable story. And what those guys went through is extraordinary as we lose more and more World War II veterans every day. I think what they were capable of and what they accomplished is going to become more legendary when they are no longer here. And what I mean by that is oftentimes history doesn't understand how enormous someone's work was until they are gone and they move from flesh and blood into legend. And I think we're in the process, and for anybody out there who studies history, of really truly starting to understand how legendary they are. And people out there don't understand, these are not professional soldiers. There's a difference between a professional soldier, which is a tiny segment of the population that serves now, right? I'm talking about your average guy who was a school teacher, and the next thing you know, he's got a gun and he's fighting Nazis. That just is mind-blowing to me. And it is extraordinary to think about what they actually went through. And again, I believe as they die off, that they will become more legendary because people will look back at what they accomplished and you won't believe that it was ever possible. And it is extraordinary to think about, and that's kind of what I thought as I watched George H.W. Bush. And I'll be honest, I think I take it a little bit for granted because I'm 39, so I grew up with a lot of World War II veterans around you. And you think about, or at least I did, the Civil War, right? That's the war that kind of was mythologized for me. But for my son's generations, as they study history, what they find to be overwhelming and unbelievable is World War II. So I just thought everything about that was a phenomenal way to say goodbye, not just to George H.W. Bush, but to the people from their generation who are all leaving us now. And I also thought it was incredibly iconic to be in that moment. And they talked about him as a citizen soldier and the last of his kind. You had lined up Donald Trump, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and Jimmy Carter. I don't believe any of them served in the military. Maybe Jimmy Carter did. I know Clinton dodged the draft in Vietnam. Obama's young enough that there was never a draft. And Donald Trump also dodged the draft, like a lot of rich people did in that era. I thought also seeing all those presidents lined up with all the vice presidents right behind them, all of those incredibly iconic, larger-than-life figures reduced to their barest humanity, sitting there on the front row as they are aging, doubtless thinking about the fact that not too long from now, probably, we will all be watching their funerals as well. Jimmy Carter is over 90, Bill Clinton over 70, Donald Trump over 70, Barack Obama is much younger than everybody else, and I'm sure those guys will have, hopefully, good health and continue to live as long as possible. But having 6 living presidents was a rarity, And I just thought it was an iconic moment to be able to see all of that in one place. It was riveting. It was incredible theater. It was hard to look away from what an incredible show that was of respect and admiration and the best, I think, of our country going forward. All right, I'm going to transition from that to what I think is the worst of the country, and that is the absurdity that we're seeing on social media. And I don't know if you saw this, but I was blown away when I saw this tweet. PETA, I think is how you pronounce it, PETA, whatever you want to call them, the people for the ethical treatment of animals. I saw this story last night, and I could not believe it. They are complaining. This is a real-life story. They are complaining about anti-animal language. We talked about World War II and what George Bush went through and what everybody else went through. The exact opposite of the greatest generation are the people who are working right now at PETA. And they put out this, I swear to God, this is real. They said that we need to stop using anti-animal language. They said words matter. As our understanding of social justice evolves, our language evolves along with it. Here's how to remove, and I swear to God this is true, this is really from PETA, speciesism from your daily conversations. So if you are guilty of speciesism, all right, if you are guilty of speciesism, this is worse than racism, this is worse than sexism, you are judging other animals. For instance, if you say, kill two birds with one stone, all right, what you should be saying is, feed two birds with one scone. This is real. Be the guinea pig, you might say. No. Be the test tube. Got to change. Can't use the phrase guinea pig. Beat a dead horse. No. You can't do that anymore. You need to say, feed a fed horse. This is real. Bring home the bacon. No. You can't say that anymore. You say, bring home the bagels. And finally, instead of saying, take the bull by the horns, you need to say, take the flower by the thorns. This is anti-animal language that we've all been using. This is this is speciesism, and you're all guilty of it, myself included. Somebody just said, would you rather work for ESPN or PETA? I might have to choose death. I don't know. But that is anti-animal language. So I appreciate all of you. I got to go get ready for my TV show. I'll be on Lock It In, 4:30 Eastern, 3:30 Central, 2:30 Mountain, 1:30 Pacific. Yeah, go read those that speciesism language to the World War II vets and say, hey, I understand you guys beat the Nazis, but great-grandpa, you might be saying something inappropriate when you say that you're trying to kill two birds with one stone. When you point out that you stood up to totalitarian dictators in Germany and in Japan at the same time, you were actually, and you said, oh, I was killing two birds with one stone, you really offended all the birds out there, great-grandpa. You should be more careful with your language. We wouldn't want to offend anybody. I love all of you. My name is Clay Travis, DBAP boys and girls, unless you need to SBAP. This is Outkick the show. Share it with your friends. I'll be on TV a little bit later with you. Radio in the morning. This has been Outkick the show.